Hello everyone, I am JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm reviewing the new debut album from the Longshot, Love is for Losers. The Longshot is a new side project from Green Day frontman Billie Joe Armstrong, and I'm a massive Green Day fan. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. If I was to rank my favorite bands, which is something I've never done, they would easily be like in the top 3. Easily. And they released, the Longshot that is, they released an EP, I believe it was either last week or a couple weeks ago, leading up to the release of this album. Of course, I reviewed that EP on this channel about a week ago, not knowing that the album was going to be coming out this soon. So, as a result, I might be repeating a lot of the points I made in that review here in this video, but, you know, I guess that's just the way it worked out here. Had I known the album would have been coming out so soon, I probably wouldn't have reviewed the EP in a full review format. But going into this project, like that EP, I was really, average. That's really what I thought it was, average. I didn't really care for any of the tracks. It wasn't awful, but it didn't really do anything for me. Like I said in that review, it's something that, if someone were to play it around me, I wouldn't mind, but it's not something I would seek out to listen to again. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what I got here on the full-length project. What you end up getting on this album is a lot of just very straightforward, typical pop-punk music. There's really not all that much that makes any of the tracks on here stand out from one another, with the exception of maybe a couple tracks I'll talk about later on. And much of this doesn't really stand out all that much from, just typical pop-punk music in general, really. It's all just very meat and potatoes pop-punk. So I guess if you're into that, maybe you'll enjoy this, but really it doesn't offer all that much that I can't really find elsewhere, but done better, really. There are some catchy, tracks on here, but they're not really catchy enough to stand out all that much, and especially because all these tracks sound very similar. At times, I find myself getting tracks on here, mixed up, confused with one another. That even happened to me listening to the EP. Check out my review of the EP leading up to this thing if you want to hear the full story behind how I got the choruses for Taxi Driver and Chasing a Ghost mixed up. But yeah, pretty much it's very similar throughout the rest of this album. Everything, for the most part, sounds very much the same. I mean, maybe a song here or there might have something a bit different, maybe an interesting drum part at one point, a catchy guitar riff and another, but it's not really enough to keep me interested for the entire length of this project, which is a rather short project overall. It's a little over 30 minutes in length, and it breezes by. It's not a super long project that really drags all that much, but considering there's not all that much going on here in this thing, it's just not really all that entertaining to listen to. Like with the EP, it was something that, if I had to listen to it again, or if it was on somewhere and I couldn't turn it off for some reason, I wouldn't be, mad or anything, but there's really nothing about it that, invites me to want to listen to it again, when I could be listening to so many other, stuff in the same genre that has a similar sound but is a lot more interesting. And one thing about this thing that I do kind of enjoy, I guess you could say, not really something that I enjoy, but something that I do appreciate, is that it's not super overproduced or anything quite like that. I know lots of modern pop punk that tends to be more generic is like that a lot of the time. I like how this has a bit more of a raw feel. It's not a super raw feel by any means. It's kind of middle of the road, I would say, but it's definitely not super overproduced or anything like that, which is something that I thought was a decent thing overall. It's not something that makes the project, all that interesting, but it's something that they did that kept the project from being a lot worse, in my opinion. And a lot of this thing, like the EP, reminds me a lot of, the trilogy era of Green Day, particularly Uno, because that album was the one with, the most straightforward kind of pop-punk songs, with the exception of a couple tracks on that album as well. But that's very much what you're getting here, just very straightforward pop-punk type tracks. Maybe the production here on this thing isn't quite as polished as it was on Uno, which I guess is a good thing. However, I feel like Uno also had, the couple of songs on that album that I think were slightly different, maybe made that album a bit better overall. I mean, the trilogy is my least favorite Green Day era albums, as it is with many people. So hearing this sound so similar to that wasn't exactly a good thing, at least in my own opinion. The closing track on this album, Goodbye to Romance, is one of the few songs on here that really does anything differently with its structure and with its sound, and even still, it's not the most, groundbreaking or interesting song in the world, In fact, it's still not quite all that. It's still relatively generic, I would say, but it's different enough from the rest of the songs on here to really stand out. And the fact that it's the closing song, it definitely ends the album on a better note than what much of the project really gives you during its runtime. It's probably my favorite song on this thing. And then you also have the track Body Bag, which is another one of the slightly different songs, I would say, though I'm not quite sure if it's for really positive reasons. Billy Joe's voice on this track is just kind of, I don't know, it kind of gets on my nerves at times. It's kind of difficult to explain, really, but just listen to the track, and it just sounds a bit, off in my opinion. And I do kind of like how the track has a bit of a slower feel to it. It definitely breaks it up from some of the other songs, hence why I said it was one of the tracks that sounds pretty different from the rest of the songs on here. But, like I said, it's not exactly for, all that good of a reason. It's not my least favorite on here, but it's definitely, down there with some of my least favorites, I would say. And as far as the rest of the tracks on here go, I mean, I really don't remember a lot of these tracks all that well, and I listened to this album many times over and over again, and still, lots of these tracks just don't stick out to me all that much. They don't really have anything going for them that's all that interesting. I do remember the 3 tracks from the EP just because I heard those more times and in the context of that EP, but still in the context of this album, they're not, made all that better considering all the other songs surrounding them sound very much the same. So overall, I would say that this is a very average project in my opinion. There's nothing about this thing that really stands out to me as very interesting or doesn't really invite me for repeated listens now that I'm done listening to it to review it. But like I said earlier, if I had to listen to this thing again for some reason, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It could work fine as background music. It doesn't sound, painful to listen to or anything quite like that. It's just very uninteresting, in my opinion. There's lots of other music out there that plays to a similar style as this that is a lot more interesting, particularly made by Green Day itself. So you could be listening to better albums from Green Day instead of this. I know this technically isn't a Green Day album, but it sounds very much like it could be one, just with the overall sound it has going for it. So yeah, I'd recommend this to hardcore Green Day fans. I mean, you're probably gonna check this out anyway if you are a hardcore Green Day fan. But if you're like Green Day, if you like straightforward pop punk music, if you like the trilogy from Green Day for some reason, then I think this album is definitely something that you'll enjoy to some degree. But if you're, if you like more, diversity in the track listing, you just care for straightforward pop punk music, the trilogy wasn't really your thing, then I don't really feel like this album is going to do all that much for you. Like I said, it doesn't take all that long to listen to, but, I think there's better albums in the same genre, even made by Green Day, that are much more worth your time than this one. So yeah, I just have to say this is average overall. But that's just my own opinion. If you feel differently, that's perfectly okay. In fact, feel free to leave your own opinion in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, guys, and stay golden.